Stay on that theme because there's obviously a push now by the federal government to better address housing affordability. That subject expected to feature prominently in the upcoming fiscal update from the federal government coming next week. Somebody who can provide us with some additional insight on building in this country is real estate veteran Ed Sonshine, who started Riocan REIT and was CEO up until 2021, and he joins us here in studio. Ed, it's great to see you.
Great. As one of the people who are aging, great to be here.
Well, and it was interesting in that conversation.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of components here. There's a lot of people coming to the country, and some of those people are going to be helping to build the homes and the properties of the future.
We hope.
Well, certainly we do. I mean, how would you characterize the landscape as you see it right now for homes and?
Well, it's a difficult landscape. I mean, the sort of most impactful event I would say over the last 2 years has been the very fast and increase in interest rates. I mean, I think from the point of view of the timing of the increases is probably in history, the fastest. You know, guys like me who remember interest rates much higher than this back in the early 90s, doesn't seem all that high when you're looking at, you know, but when money was almost free for almost 15 years, it's very high and it's going to have a big impact. And at the same time, you've had a huge increase in construction costs. As the gentleman from Siena was saying, it is to the point where it's uneconomic between interest rates and the cost of construction to build anything new, except in the most extraordinary of circumstances.
Maybe you can take us behind the scenes of what happens with new projects. For example, anecdotally, one of the things I've heard is that when there are big new projects out there that have a residential component to them, there are call them investors, people who saw the opportunity in Canada to be part of those projects, and that higher interest rate environment means that they're maybe not as committed to new projects as they might have been before. And then if they're not committed to the project, it's hard to get the project off the ground, in part because of what you just talked about, higher costs, all of that. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to, I'll call it the multi-residential market. There's the condominium side, which is, I think, the one you're talking about. And the way that market has developed, and because of the long lead time, you need substantial sales to, we'll call them investors, to get the financing, as you said. They're not bad people. They're very good people, because until purpose-built housing started being constructed again, just over the last 5-6 years, and the condominium investor market really provided the rental housing. Imperfectly, because you don't have security of tenure and you've got a lot of other things going on. So my friends that build condominiums tell me that market is very quiet. You know, it'll succeed in the odd location, you know, that happens to just be very, very attractive. And it'll succeed, interestingly enough, where you can assure investors that they're not going to have to close for 5 years. Now, construction, depending on the kind of building, can actually take 4 to 5 years. So a lot of people are saying, well, if it's 5 years away, I'll still make a bet on Toronto real estate, picking that one. On the purpose-built rental housing, which I know a little more about, it's been hit by the same two factors, interest rates and cost of construction. For a while, you could build anyway because rents increased so quickly, which is not necessarily a good thing, but it happened because of the lack of supply. And now, even with those higher rents, because at a certain point you hit a ceiling of affordability, and so, but even with those higher rents, between interest rates and the cost of construction, it's very hard to make a purpose-built rental housing make financial sense. So there's been very few starts in the last year and a half.
One thing we've heard from the federal government is providing some fresh tax breaks, which I'm sure when you're doing the math on new construction are another consideration, but maybe it's not quite enough.
Well, it may be. I mean, the GST reduction helped. Unfortunately, I think interest rates went up a half a point since they did that, which totally took that benefit away. But it's still a benefit on the cost side. But again, I'm old enough to remember something called a MERB program, which is probably was gotten rid of by the government 40 years ago because of abuses. But it worked. It worked where basically people investing in real estate, a multi-unit resident, MERB was multi-unit residential building. And so apartment buildings, basically. They would get certain faster write-offs on their taxes. They could apply those write-offs to other income than just rental income. So that worked. I got a lot of buildings built. The other program that even older, I wasn't around for this one, but back in the 50s and 60s, they got a lot of rental housing built. Was basically, it was called limited dividend housing, and that was more CMHC. They would provide mortgages essentially at government cost. In other words, whatever it cost the government to borrow, they'd pass that through, maybe a little bit extra just for their cost of doing it. And in return, and be able to borrow that very cheap money, it was affordable housing, and you had to agree, even if you weren't subject, and back then there was no rent control, but today there's no rent control on new buildings either, but you'd have to agree to effectively make yourself subject to rent control during the 25-year term of that mortgage.
So a lot of maybe ideas that
there
are
are
worth
things they can
discussing right now. Are you hopeful that some of these issues can get resolved of affordability if we make a few changes, listen to more voices, maybe get rid of some of the red tape associated with building?
Well, yeah, it still takes, I mean, all of those have to happen, actually, or most of them. The government could help a lot doing some of this, the federal government on the tax and the lending side. And then you've got the municipal governments where, with the best intentions, it still takes 2 to 3 years to get from a piece of land to a building permit, sometimes longer. And then, the bottom line is the cost of a apartment building is still about 30% government charges. And I know they need the money to build the services and so on, but 30% is a lot.
Yeah. And real quickly, I mean, your dad was a builder.
Yeah, was a house builder.
You got started when you were a teenager. That's why I was asking about new Canadians as well. Whether it's people who are here or people who are coming to the country, how important is it to have people that are ready to get out there and build as well?
Well, it's critical. If you look at the CMHC estimates of how much housing we need to produce over the next 5 to 10 years, with all the good things that might happen in interest rates and costs and so on, I don't believe you have enough skilled labor in this country today to actually build it. And so, historically, we got a lot of that skilled labor through immigration. And I'm not sure, I guess that'd be primarily the federal government, is actually focused enough on that, on building that in. And similarly, I know the Ontario government's doing, I think, a really good job on making the skilled labor trades more attractive to go into for Canadian young people. Yeah. But I think they could do even more, subsidizing the tuition to go to, some of the community colleges to become electricians and plumbers and, all those skilled trades. These guys actually make very nice livings, but it's something that's never quite attracted enough young Canadians.